Well, good morning, everybody. I want to start you off today with a snow map because this is really kind of the strongest indicator I can give you about how much this pattern has changed. We built in a lot of snow throughout the western mountains just in the last 72 hours, and there was a heavy bit of snow that rolled right here through this part of Minnesota into northern Wisconsin and the UP, and it's going to continue here in Ontario and Quebec as we go forward. But the reason I'm showing you this is that this is an indicator that we were able to dip enough cold air into the western United States to help dig a trough, and that's been our biggest hurdle since September, is to get a persistent troughing pattern in the western United States to change the whole thing across the country. So thinking that through, I want to show you the latest storm reports. This was on the 30th, and we had 161 reports of severe weather. Most of these were wind reports across the central United States, but there was a lot of rainfall that was delivered with this as well. And just looking here over the last 72 hours, this is the first of several rounds of rain that's coming to the midsection of the United States, which is going to break, start to break a long-standing drought problem in that region. Now, each of these systems have to enter through the northwest or through the western United States. We've seen some heavier rainfall coming into coastal Washington and Oregon, and each of them will continue to put down more snow into the Rocky Mountains as well. Again, the places I'm most concerned about staying dry would be the southwest as we go forward in this forecast, and the southeast. We'll continue to look at the kind of the pattern there. But I wanted to zoom in a bit on what happened in the Midwest, because there's a lot of places here that picked up 1 to some places up to 3 inches of rainfall that had been exceptionally dry. And we're just kind of focusing in on a region here that, before this all started, had extremely low soil moisture values. Now, that's just one spot. We could look around the country at all of the different areas. Like, look how deep the drought situation is in the Northeast, especially in parts of the Mid-Atlantic. But the Great Lakes Basin, the Ohio Basin, the Mississippi Basin, the Missouri Basin, coming all the way down here to the Southern Plains, this whole area east of the Rocky Mountains is incredible deficits on soil moisture. But this is the map from the 28th, and this is what it looks like now. So you're looking at this going, wow, we got water down to 16 inches. I guess I better be clear about something. This is a soil moisture percentile map for a layer. All right. So it goes from 0 to 16 inches or 0 to 40 centimeters. So it's that top that got quite a bit of water into it. And that's why the whole layer shows up, in this range now versus being way down here in the lowest 2 to 5 percentile category. And as things go forward, I'm expecting continued improvement, especially across a large part of the central United States. We'll look elsewhere around the country in a few moments, but I want to focus on this right now. This is how October shaped up, though, and those rains that did come through this area, plus the snow to the north, did knock back the stats a bit. So instead of October finishing as, near record dry here, that one system at the end of the month put the stats somewhere here. And I think this is really important for everyone watching to understand, because sometimes we do historical analysis based on our own calendar year. The atmosphere doesn't care that we have a calendar, but we often do that just because it's easier for us to process. In other words, maybe some video in the future, I'll go back and say, hey, let's look at the driest Octobers on record. And while certainly down in the southeast or into Texas or into the northeast, that'll be the case, this one event at the very end of the month will offset the statistic and probably not push it to the forefront of the analysis. Does that make sense? So I have to be careful of that myself, because I find it easy at times just to do things month by month by month. And this is a kind of a statistic buster here at the end of the month, putting us much closer to the average in the distribution. Thinking about this since October is now done, I want to show you the temperature stats as well. And this is really a great map to explain where most of the month of October saw the jet stream level pattern building a huge ridge that was over the southwest. And it just opened at times into the Midwest and opened to the Great Lakes. And that particular pattern is one that we've got to learn a lot about. And I want to show it to you again. So this is, when you go back actually to midway through September to the end of October, what we saw. We saw a very large Pacific ridge here. The trough fell on the eastern side of it, but was in the Gulf of Alaska there. And it made this turn going around this ridge here. And that is what our net flow looked like. And the problem with flow like this is that while it opens the door for tropical systems to come into the southeast, and during this time period we saw 4, right? But what it doesn't do is it doesn't allow that tropical moisture to move farther to the north, and it gets this whole region hot and quite dry. And what had to happen, and we remember when we did that video back, I think it was late September, I'll have to go look. I said if we're going to get into a wetter time period in October and November, this trough has to be here. so that the flow comes around it and runs, opening up a ridge that sits off the southeast coast and delivers the moisture. That is what we waited on. But because of this pattern, we ended up getting this. These are the anomalous winds. So we had, look, fast winds here that made the turn, came around one ridge. Trough was here, went into British Columbia. Second ridge, there. And then you come over here, that's where we had a low forming. So you see, this is the wrong circulation pattern to deliver it. And I'm showing you all of this because of how different it is now. And what we're going to be watching is the next few rounds built on the northward extended jet stream that's in the Pacific. Remember, we talked about that on Wednesday. The Pacific jet shifted north, but we have multiple troughs coming through that are extending their way into the western U.S. And these two, this one here and this one right here, are going to be the source later on this weekend for a deep low that's going to form and open up the Gulf of Mexico and really set things off for a kind of explosive event next week. And I do mean that. I think this next one's going to be quite powerful in what it's going to deliver. Because as we fast forward it here and get to the 4th of November, that's what the atmosphere is going to be looking like in the low-level flow. So what do we have here? We have another potent cold front coming through, multiple boundaries to be watching, like down here is the dry line, big mid-Atlantic ridge. So that's what the problem is with getting the mid-Atlantic any of this moisture, but the Gulf is open wide. And we will be talking about something coming out of the tropics at that point as well. So knowing that this is where our weekend is heading with another system coming through the west, I'll show you the details there in a moment, ejecting into the plains, putting up a multiple day kind of open Gulf situation, we're looking at a lot of precipitation and the risk of some severe weather. So here's our first map. This is today's severe thunderstorm risk map. We have a marginal risk down here in New Mexico and Texas. Tomorrow, as we get into Saturday, it's more of Texas, south central Texas, western Texas. And then as we get into the day on Sunday, from central Texas through the Red River, getting into Oklahoma, Kansas, and we're going to watch this open up again once we get into day 4, farther to the east and to the north into this area. So this is just how this next system is setting up, and it does have the risk of bringing with it very heavy rainfall. This is our map for today, looking at the risk of excessive rainfall. This is Saturday's map. So from north central Texas through Oklahoma and eastern Kansas and Missouri, and this would be Sunday's map. We've now got a moderate risk in Oklahoma, southeast Kansas, and Missouri for the risk of very heavy rain. In fact, it moves all the way up here to kind of this tri-state area between Illinois, Missouri, and Iowa. So you stitch all that together and you get this. And we've already seen heavy rains in this area, and now we see the forecast models putting down an additional, well, if we kind of just take a quicker look in here, there's the potential for being up here on the color bar. Now remember, this is the WPC product, so this is a product that has humans also involved in it. It's not just raw model output, and that's a broad area of very, very heavy rainfall right in the heart of one of our epicenters of drought. But as we mentioned, the ridging that's over the southeast and up the east coast, this is an area where drought is going to continue to build, and it's going to be a pretty hard line on where the rain makes it. So we're quite concerned about the evolution of the drought in this area. The southwest stays drier, the Canadian prairie stays drier, and this pocket here of the north and western plains getting into Montana stays drier as well. But a lot of this is going to be coming through as snow. Same thing with the Cascades and parts of the Sierra Nevada, and I'll show you that again in a few moments. Looking at this, you do start to notice down here, I know it's just on the edge of the model domain, but there's some activity going on in the tropics. And if you remember, when we were talking back midway through the month, we thought that there'd be another surge of tropical activity at the end of the month due to the movement of the MJO. So what happened is the MJO swept way out into the Pacific Ocean. And now you can see our best rising motion is over the Caribbean. It's over the southern plains of the United States. It's over the Gulf of Mexico and western Atlantic. And so what we've done here is we've taken off the upper level suppression in the atmosphere, and it's basically just breathing. This is where air is ascending, and over here is where it's descending. Now, we don't expect it to stay there forever. It's going to start to shift around. The MJO is a moving piece of the atmosphere now. It is not stalled. But as a result, we've now seen the National Hurricane Center. In fact, let's see if they've done an update this morning. Good. They've now upped this to a 70% chance just on their newest update, which just came out. 70% chance, of tropical cyclone formation. Now, I don't have all the details on this yet. I looked. It's going to be about timing, and I'm going to show you what needs to be timed. But at this point, this is what we've got from the European ensemble. There is a tropical low forming here. And over this weekend, it is expected to move toward Jamaica, see this, and then head to the Yucatan Strait and possibly get into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the timing part of this that I'm stressing here is that, yes, the ridge slides over, see it here, opening up that channel, but how quickly does the next trough come through to either smash this down into the Gulf of Mexico or push it farther to the east or put so much wind shear into it that we can't get it to form. So that's why we're going to have to watch this animation. Let me refresh this to get the newest data. There we go. So our artificial intelligence forecast, this is what we're keeping an eye on. Here's the lead trough. Here's the one that's following. And these two pieces are going to be coming together tonight. So this is Friday night. See how they just start to merge one into the other, running over this big ridge north of Hawaii. So that is what sets off this next deep low that gets all the way down into Southern California and Arizona. It will be limited on precipitation here, but it will dig by Sunday afternoon and evening. And then it ejects right here as we get into the day on Monday. There's your dominant southeast ridge. There's the flow coming out of the southwest. That's the recipe we talked about that has to come into play in order to break this whole thing apart and to give us better chances at getting rainfall across the whole country. Moving this ridge out will be key for the east, but we'll see if that happens. So this is Monday into Tuesday. Look, another reinforcing trough. Now here's the timing issue. This is the artificial intelligence where it's projecting next Wednesday where that tropical system is going to be. So starting here, and it's going to go something like that. The ridge is living somewhere in this area, which means we're going to get flow around it, pushing whatever this is into the Gulf of Mexico if the timing is right. Now, do you remember when we talked about Helene? Helene had a trough that came over the top, down like this, and grabbed Helene and wrapped it around. We don't have this now. We have a trough that's doing that. So what's important is we're going to increase the wind shear ahead of this system rather than have a trough that grabs Helene and pulls it north. Well, this isn't Helene, of course. So what I'm watching here as we play forward is how these two things interact. If this cuts off and gets slow, that's what happens. When lows cut off and slow down, then you'll buy more time for this system to follow warm water and be influenced by the ridge off to the east, meaning that it will likely come into the Gulf of Mexico. And if you just had me pin something down now, knowing I have very, very little kind of evidence on this, it's a week from now, I would tell you that eastern Texas to the Panhandle would be in play for whatever this is. Now, will it be able to become a full-strength hurricane? That's yet to be seen, because oftentimes at this point in the year, the wind shear in this area is so high that systems have a difficult time intensifying. But the play between this ridge and the cutoff low is going to be everything for that. I know it doesn't look like much, but remember, hurricanes are not cold core systems. So that's why you don't see this. That's a cold core system. That's why it's blue. That's why I make it blue. So what we see here is that playing forward, the artificial intelligence loses it. So I just want to let you know, it doesn't do much with it. But we do see here that, the upper level low that cuts off over Arizona and New Mexico makes it over to Kansas. And this is what says next weekend. There's another round of potentially very heavy rainfall in this area. And then what I find behind it is we just keep going. That's November 11th, 12th, troughs after trough after trough in the artificial intelligence. And this means, like we talked about, remember this? I don't know how many of you watch every day, but like we had a couple of big statements, right? Octobers and Novembers, when there's a La Nina, rarely look the same. And you can make that statement just broadly anyway. It's often very odd that you have back-to-back months that look like the same, but La Ninas, just doing the, looking back, they just don't. So let's see what this all means. What I've got for you here is kind of my 5-model spread on agweather.com, looking at the different forecast models and the heaviest precip. And I do this so you can kind of stand back and blur your eyes and get a good look at the rainfall totals here overall. But it's good to jump from here maybe over to a probability map. So this is a 10-day, which will capture the next 3 systems. The next 2. We just had one come through. The next 2 systems at the chance of getting over an inch. And if we step it up to 2 inches, probably got a new model running here. Yeah. Let's go back. By the way, after daylight saving time ends this weekend, I won't have this issue. There we go. That's the probability of 2 inches over the next 10 days. Here and here where the systems are entering. And here's 4. So we have some models right now in the ECMWF ensemble, so model runs, that are looking at a better than 90% chance along the Red River Valley of the South into Arkansas, possibly parts of Missouri, but definitely Oklahoma, that have a 90% chance of grabbing 4 inches of rainfall. And this is where the European ensemble is trying to take the tropical system out of the Caribbean. So that is going to be a kind of a mainstay of discussion as we get into next week. Might as well do this. What about 8 inches? That's a lot of rainfall. On the dry side of this, you'll see the southeast and up the east coast as explained. That's where the ridges are going to be. We have poor flow coming through the Canadian Prairie, Montana, the upper Midwest, the northern plains, not the upper Midwest, and then the southwest. What's going on in the southwest is to get heavy precip here, you got to cut off a low in this area, not here. Or you've got to have strong subtropical flow, and we just don't have that yet. Maybe that'll come later on this winter. But these are the areas that are showing up driest. Let's go and have a look at the model runs. This is the European high-resolution run. And as we play this forward, there we go, getting into Saturday and into Sunday, you're going to see multiple days this weekend of heavy rainfall in the southern plains. And the reason for that is the broad trough is in, snow's coming in the Rockies, flow is coming into the northwest. There's a ridge here starting in the mid-Atlantic moving to the northeast, and it has just got flow around it, and everything is meeting in the middle, and that's where the best lift is. So this is Saturday night, getting through the day on Sunday, into Monday and Tuesday, and because that ridge in those 4 days started here and moved to there, there's just going to be an open setup for heavy rains to come into this area several days in a row. So when we walk you through it again, let's go back. That's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And you can see on the backside the snow that's coming into British Columbia, the snow into the Rockies, the snow that's going to be, or the Cascades, the snow that will be in the Rockies. And I'm expecting several days of some strong storms in here next week as well. And also some heavy rain. Not several, but a couple. And then you got there to next Thursday, and there is where the European model's taken this tropical system. Now the current operational run brought it through and dumped it over here. I'm just saying I'm going to watch this whole corridor much more carefully despite the one run putting it here. But you know that with more troughs rolling through, this is where that cutoff low is. Still more heavy rain in the southern plains. See that? That's getting us out there to, let's take a look. That's the 8th, 9th, and 10th. So that's some impressive rainfall overall. Let's do one other thing real quick here. Let's just go back to ag weather. We'll do, let's look at this map right here. That's the 7-day snowfall total. In fact, we can stretch this out real quick. I'm just going to do this. Let's go out to a 10-day just to show you all of the systems and the potential for very heavy snow in the central Rockies. Some pretty impressive there. Okay, what about week 2? We know the pattern is going to continue. The European model, the artificial intelligence, and the GFS have a very similar story. The CPC was drier here in their update yesterday. I bet they modify it this morning when they update this map to bring better precipitation to the kind of northern tier of the United States. I think we'll all keep the drier in the northeast, although the AIFS is trying to bring in some wetter conditions there as well. So there's your week 2 forecast, and this makes a lot of sense to me right here. Wild card, the tropical system. Okay. All right. From there, let's get into a longer range, and then we'll talk about South America. I think so much of what's going on right now is because of the movement of the MJO. And it is sweeping through phase 7. It's about to get into 8, 1, and 2. Now, it's been difficult to pick up on the lag. In other words, sometimes it'll go into phase 8, and then we'll get the phase 8 pattern across North America 5 days later, or 10 days later, sometimes even 15 days later. What I want to show you is that the progression through this side of the diagram lands you here. That's what phase 8 looks like. So could we push back in another ridge at some point here in the next, well, it's not really coming in the next 10 days, but possibly? Yeah. But for the most part, going into November, MJO phase 1 and phase 2 will likely dominate. So what does that look like? That's a trough that lives in the Gulf of Alaska but extends into the western United States and ejects into the plains. That's a ridge that lives off the northeast coast. And what this means is a very active pattern for most of the United States. It's all going to be on the placement of this ridge, week in and week out, to know where we're going to be seeing the driest risks along the East Coast. But if you look at the new European model data, this goes out from November 15 to December 15. It's got that pattern being reflected. So we see ridging here, troughs coming in, pulling through, ridging sitting along the East Coast. You see your drier risks in this area. You see your wettest chances in the central United States and coming into the West Coast. It's a very active pattern set up for the month of November. Now, I've done a lot of long-range analysis in the last couple weeks, and you have seen those videos, so I know you know my thought process for the remainder of winter. We even talked about next growing season already. So what I want to do today is we've looked at this mid-November to mid-December outlook, and I just want to show you that the new CPC update came out yesterday, and this is their full November outlook, and it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing I just described to you. So it's good to see that there's consistency in what we're all predicting for this next month and possibly halfway through December as well. And there's a lot of indications that December is going to start off with kind of a more real, normal winter feel to it versus having just extended fall-like conditions into December this year. So we'll keep building that narrative next week. From here, let's just talk South America and we can wrap this up. This is the latest update we have from the CHIRPS data set on the 1-month drought severity index, where they also include into this wet conditions. And it's just a point to show you that the second half of October did bring in the needed rains into this area to break the very dry conditions that were a part of the extension of their dry season. And the latest, I really don't have a lot of difference here. We've gone a little wetter over the next 10 days in southern Brazil than as dry as it was forecast. There's pockets of dryness in Argentina, wetter from parts of Cordoba over toward Buenos Aires. But the central part of Brazil, including the center-west region, continues to show very heavy rainfall. They'll update again later today their planting progress on soybeans for Mato Grosso, and you'll likely see that they were able to plant in the month of October, I think probably 80%, maybe more, of the soybean crop as these rains came through. The latest update continues the narrative we've had, which is we expect this area to remain wetter. How many times have you seen me draw this, right? Drier here, drier risks there. I think that's going to be the case as we watch the pattern evolve mid-November to mid-December. Part of it is driven by the La Nina, which has a much closer proximity to the flow pattern. It's right here where the La Nina forms to Brazil. Part of this is due to some of the behavior in the central Atlantic where the moisture is coming through. And a lot of this has to do with the MJO progression. And I'll just say this. If the MJO sweeps over into phase 4 or 5, we're actually going to see at some point in late November a larger, drier signal showing up in this area. But it might just be for a week or so before it goes back away. But I don't think it's going to be anything to talk about. Like, in other words, okay, a week of dryness is not going to harm this crop. So that's what I know. And I look forward to kind of diagnosing it and studying a bit more this weekend now that I'm back from travel this week. And I appreciate your patience as I kind of had a bit of an upset schedule this week, but we'll talk again next week. Have a good one. Thanks.